Most Americans have had an opportunity to enter a courthouse, maybe to register a car, pay taxes, serve on a jury, or to research family birth and death records. This is where citizens can freely and openly have access to government. Standing in our midst, reminding us of our rights and that we are a nation of laws. The courthouse is a living monument to our carefully crafted democracy. Major funding for this production is provided by the West Virginia Courthouse Facilities Improvement Authority, which provides funding assistance for the modification of existing courthouse facilities and the construction of new courthouse facilities within our state. Additional funding provided by Brick Street Mutual Insurance Company, Chesapeake Energy, the West Virginia Bar Foundation, the West Virginia Humanities Council, and our other sponsors across West Virginia. Our county system of government has its origins in colonial America.
Well, the concept of a county, for many of us, goes back to England and the Shire, but the word actually has a French origin, because when the European settlers came over here, despite the fact that they were English, they didn't establish shires, they established counties. And the reason for the county, particularly in areas like West Virginia, which was then part of Virginia, is that population was so sparsely scattered that a town wouldn't work as it did in New England. So in New England, you have a town with a meeting house. In areas like Virginia, you're going to have a county, which incorporates a much larger area, and each of those counties is going to have a county courthouse.
As people moved west and new counties were formed in western Virginia, the courthouse often had a humble beginning. The early courts were often in private homes. The first courthouse of Greenbrier County, then Virginia in 1778, was designated by the Virginia General Assembly as the home of John Stuart.
As people moved west, as you know, in terms of Virginia, as they came west, you have land claims. You have all kinds of legal issues. So from the very beginning, you have to have some place where that is accomplished. And so you identify a place where you're going to have court, and then you have court days. And if you read some of the old documents that date back to the 18th century, some of these court days were pretty wild places. You're going to have hundreds, if not thousands, of people show up, because it's not only a place where you do legal business, it's also a place where you can come and meet people, come and maybe trade various kinds of items, maybe sell some things. And it's a combination legal get-together and party, particularly because these folks are scattered all over hills and dales, all over the area. And the more rural the area, the more likely that court day is going to be a big issue. And that's why if you look at even some very small towns that had courthouses, they're likely to have taverns, they're likely to have some kind of inn, they're likely to have some kind of businesses that will provide services to those folks who are coming in for a day, maybe 2 days. Some of them might be here for a week.
Courthouses were natural gathering places. This was especially true when the county court was in session and town brimmed with visitors, and court days often became general trade days. With the rise of industry in the 19th century, the importance for a town being the county seat and possessing the courthouse grew. It was, on occasion, a matter of intense rivalry between communities. In 1790, the Randolph County seat was in Beverly, a small but thriving farming town that also benefited greatly from trade along the Staunton-Parkersburg Turnpike. And so it remained for over 100 years. In 1889, Stephen B. Elkins and Henry Gassaway Davis built the West Virginia Central and Pittsburgh Railroad into the Tigard Valley to develop the area's timber and coal resources. By 1890, the new town of Elkins, bearing the name of its founder, was located just 7 miles north of Beverly. With its railroad yard, Elkins soon eclipsed Beverly in both size and wealth. This shift in economic power triggered a struggle for political control and the location of the county seat. The issue was put to a public vote, with the first victory going to Beverly. However, the dissatisfied residents of Elkins quickly complained that the courthouse in Beverly was too small. A new one was constructed in 1894, but it lasted only 3 years. The ill-fated courthouse was destroyed by a fire in 1897, with each side blaming the other for the blaze. The dispute became so serious that in May 1898, Beverly's sheriff deputized 100 citizens. Armed with rifles and dynamite, the defenders dug trenches around the courthouse to prepare for an impending assault from Elkins. The confrontation was averted at the last minute, and in 1900, Elkins won the county seat. A new courthouse was completed in the early 1900s and was referred to as one of the most handsome, substantial, and conveniently arranged temples of justice in the state of West Virginia. Sitting as a prominent feature of downtown Elkins, the native stone facade emphasizes the strength and mass of the building, and at the time of its completion was a genuine statement about the power of industrial development in Elkins. The detailed arched windows and doorways add elegance to this outstanding architectural design. In Tucker County, the original county seat was St. George. When the county voted to move the courthouse to Parsons, there were legal delays. Some residents of Parsons grew weary of the wait and organized a vigilante committee of more than 200 armed men. They broke into the courthouse, confiscated all the records, and even took the bell hanging in the courthouse tower. A temporary courthouse was established in Parsons in a store on Main Street. The court continued to operate out of the store until a permanent courthouse was constructed. Tucker County was the site of an important civil rights case, 61 years before Brown v. Board of Education reached the U.S. Supreme Court. In 1893, Carrie Williams, a black schoolteacher at the colored school, continued teaching after school officials shortened the term at her school from 8 to 5 months. Williams retained John Robert Clifford, the first African American admitted to the bar in West Virginia, as her counsel. Clifford successfully sued the school board for her salary for the full school term, and the decision was upheld by the West Virginia Supreme Court, making Williams the first case in U.S. history to hold that racial discrimination in school terms and teacher pay is against the law. In Wyoming County, tempers flared in a 3-way contest for the location of the courthouse. Voters finally decided to move the county seat from its original location, in Oceana, to Pineville. There also was strong opposition from the residents of Mullins, who wanted the courthouse in their community. The issue was finally put to rest with a court decision, and the records were moved to Pineville. Located on a hillside overlooking the town of Pineville, the Wyoming County Courthouse was built in the neoclassical revival style, with full-height porches and large classic columns. It was constructed with locally cut stone and sits atop a broad, terraced commons. The parapet along the roofline adds an almost castle-like quality. The courthouse is topped with a richly detailed clock tower. The jail, constructed of the same native-cut stone, was built in 1930 with funds from the Works Progress Administration. Centered in the long series of steps that form the front approach is a statue of Reverend W. H. Cook, a soldier, statesman, and minister. He was one of the area's first European settlers. Inside the courthouse, a formal entryway provides an expansive and comfortable waiting area for citizens. Location was not the only cause of disputes. Fairmont was well established as the Marion County seat. However, as the 19th century drew to a close, to many the old courthouse seemed too small and not befitting a growing industrial community.
This courthouse was opened in 1900. But we had a little courthouse before this one when Marion County became a county in 1842, while we got ourselves a courthouse and put it together. It was red brick, it was charming, had columns in front and all that sort of thing. But after a while, it became too small. It became run down, and the community started to worry, the county started to worry about its courthouse. And there's a movement to have a new courthouse. Well, there were arguments, always the same arguments, they don't change. Not enough money, we don't need it, and etc. And so some of the arguments went on, and they weren't getting any place. And so some of the citizenry, rumor has it the sheriff was in the group, got together one evening and with their pickaxes and shovels or hammers, sledgehammers, whatever they could find. And rumor has it, and it's probably a pretty good rumor, that there were several barrels of whiskey also. Kind of made a party out of it. And they attacked that little courthouse, and they tore it down, and then they had their pictures taken standing on the rubble. Now, that seems a little strange to me, but I guess it didn't bother anybody. Well, when the people got up the next morning, their courthouse was gone. They were forced into, whether they had the money or not, whether they wanted it or not, they were forced into building a new courthouse. Well, people were upset, of course, but they settled down and started to work on this beautiful new courthouse.
The Marion County Courthouse stands in grand testimony to the community's rise as a leading industrial center in the state. Completed in 1900, this massive and impressive courthouse dominates the center of town. Constructed in the Beaux-Arts style, it immediately demands attention with its monumental dome. Interestingly, the dome itself is actually cast iron. It is painted to look like the stone to blend in with the rest of the building. Expansive approaches invite the public to enter, and elaborate design detailing provides a rich visual environment, a statement of the importance of the business conducted within. The artistic style is carried to the interior with a high, ornate rotunda, capped by the interior of the massive dome. High, vaulted ceilings with intricate ornamentation are reminiscent of a grand European palace. Murals unique to the courthouse are located at each end of the arched hallways. Painted by individual artists, the murals depict significant parts of the county's history.
To the people, it's almost like a church. People, like when they come to visit the courtroom, they'll speak in a whisper so as not to disturb. I think the courtroom represents to the people justice. I think most people have an abiding faith in our system of justice, and I think the courtroom represents that to them.
The most prominent feature is the judge's bench. Raised above the surrounding courtroom, it commands attention and conveys the importance of the matters before the court. The courtroom was frequently the center of community interest. The theater-style seating and a balcony could accommodate a large audience that would attend trials, often as a form of entertainment. The courtroom is decorated with artwork to represent the desire for justice. Various carefully crafted architectural elements add to the beauty and dignity of the room. Located in the center of the ceiling, a large skylight not only provides an extra source of light, it too adds to the overall beauty of the courtroom design. Larger, grand courthouses began to appear across the state. They were designed to stand as proud symbols of democracy and freedom. However, on the practical side, they also represented a community's political and economic influence.
The courthouse is a representation of the government of and by the people. And whether you come from a large county or a small county, what goes on in the courthouse, in the minds of local residents, is important. And as a consequence of that, many people would want to make sure that their courthouse looks like an important building. So when you go into some of these towns, they might be small, but all of a sudden right here in this square is a building that maybe is the only building in town that's made out of stone, or in some cases brick, when everything else is made out of wood. And that building wants to tell us something. And what that building tells us is what goes on here is important. The people know that it's important, and you want everybody to look at that building and say, wow. So it might be taller than most, it might have some kind of dome on it, it might have various kinds of statues out front, it might have a certain kind of landscaping, but whatever, it's going to attract people's interest. And even if you had never heard of the word courthouse, you would know when you looked at that building, this is obviously an important place.
Well, I think the different and varying images of courthouses in the state of West Virginia, I think there's a common thread amongst all of the design. I think it is that idea that it is a public building, and it does say, does express the dignity of the courts and the power of the government. I don't think there's any question that every one of those buildings, every courthouse in West Virginia pretty much really kind of speaks to the idea of a public building and government. I think personally there's certain courthouse language that does that maybe a little bit stronger than others. I think that there are buildings that are more classical that just have that sense of, county government, bold and strong, that's conveyed in a classical building image.
The oldest of our courthouses still in continuous use is in Lewisburg, Greenbrier County, one of the oldest counties in the state. The Virginia General Assembly created the county on March 1, 1778. It encompassed a huge tract of land. 11 West Virginia counties, either in whole or in part, would be created from the original Greenbrier County. A small stone obelisk pays tribute to two significant figures in the county's history: General Andrew Lewis, who commanded the army at the Battle of Point Pleasant, and Colonel John Stewart, who served under Lewis and is considered the founder of the county. Built in 1837, the style was inspired by the 19th century archaeological discoveries which brought about a nostalgia for the ideals and cultures of the past. Its Greek Revival design represents permanence, balance, and order. The original central part of the building was constructed by local brick mason John Dunn and is made of locally fired brick. Sharing the same Greek Revival style is the Jefferson County Courthouse located in Charlestown. Taller in appearance, it sports a feature common to many courthouses, a magnificent clock tower. This feature alone made a courthouse a landmark in a community. It housed a central town clock for all to see. While architectural style may draw attention to a courthouse, history also has a way of showing up on the courthouse steps. Sunday evening, October 16, 1859. An abolitionist New York farmer, John Brown, led 21 men in a bold attempt to seize the federal arsenal at Harper's Ferry, Virginia. U.S. Marines, commanded by Colonel Robert E. Lee, captured Brown and the insurrectionists. Charged with murder, inciting rebellion, and treason against the Commonwealth of Virginia, the trial lasted 5 days and returned a verdict of guilty on all counts. On the 2nd of December, 1859, Brown was taken from the jail by wagon to a field a short distance away, where he was hanged. During the Civil War, in 1863, Union troops occupied the courthouse and immediate grounds. They were surrounded by Confederate forces under the command of General John D. Bowdoin. A brief battle ensued and the Union soldiers were forced to withdraw. The courthouse had suffered considerable damage, rendering it unsuitable for use. With no functional courthouse, the county seat was moved to Shepherdstown, and from 1865 to 1871, the courthouse was located in the town hall, which is now McMurrin Hall of Shepherd University. The courthouse in Charlestown was rebuilt. The new courtroom now occupied space on the second floor. The courtroom is relatively simple yet elegant in design. Theater-style seating provides ample space for the public. A center litigation well with enclosed railing separates the defendant from the audience. At the rear of the room, a balcony, deemed the ladies' listening gallery, allows for more genteel accommodations to observe the proceedings of the court. A rather large circular chandelier with gas lighting was added for evening sessions. This was later updated to electric lighting. In the summer and fall of 1921, 250 miles from Charlestown, in the coal fields of southwestern West Virginia, events were unfolding that would bring a second treason trial to Jefferson County in 1922. Violent encounters between those seeking to unionize miners and anti-union forces culminated in the Battle of Blair Mountain. Hundreds of miners were indicted for murder, conspiracy, and treason by a Logan County grand jury. The cases were then transferred to Jefferson County. Attracting considerable national attention was the trial of Union leader Bill Blizzard. Blizzard and many of the miners in subsequent trials here and in other counties were acquitted, while some were imprisoned. It became a turning point in the future of the Union movement and the law. As the 19th century came to a close, courthouse construction increased. An architectural style popular at the time was Richardsonian Romanesque, named after Henry Hobson Richardson, recognized as the first true American architectural style. While of the same style, the Kanawha County Courthouse is still unique, as architects brought their own vision to the project. This block-long structure is massive in size, reflecting the rapidly expanding county needs in the period following Charleston's emergence as the permanent state capital.
I think the Kanawha County Courthouse is an exceptional piece of architecture. One of the things that's always struck me about this building is just the movement the sculptural nature of the facade. It's clearly not a box. It is clearly broken down in scale. It's a very large building, but yet it's broken down with, really a lot of nice elements that come together as a composition for a large building. The towers, the spires, the sloped roof, the use of stone. The use of stone surrounds in the building and around the windows. Just really all of the detail, from the broad scale of the building down to the intimate scale of the cut stone and the detailing around the arched windows. It's just, tremendous craftsmanship and tremendous design. What impresses me the most about this courtroom is its volume. That ceiling space in here has got to be 35 feet high, and just nowadays it's very difficult to build a courthouse with a 30-foot high courtroom ceiling space, and it's it's just a grand volume space. It's a grand theater that was to handle trials, and so just the sense of space is the most overwhelming thing that I feel when I walk in here. I like that the courtroom isn't dark. I like that, the wood wainscot here, that there's enough use of wood and enough craftsmanship and treatment of it that has that certain dignity. And if you look at the iconic columns there that at the entries and the way that those arches are treated, very nice craftsmanship there. If you look at that, the way that the judge's dais is framed, with the large arch there, it just makes the centerpiece really for the entire room. And this is a very generous litigation well here, and it's not cramped, and I imagine if I were an attorney, it'd be a great place to try a case, and if I were a judge, it'd be a great place to sit over a trial.
The interior has been altered over the years. However, the outline and detailing of cast iron vaults in the original structure's first floor hallway can still be seen. The cast iron railings and newel posts for the stairs are original. Located in the county seat of West Union, the Doddridge County Courthouse occupies a prominent hilltop, dominating the community landscape. Long recognized as one of the finest examples of late Victorian Romanesque architecture in the state, the building's character is accented with rich brick and stone detailing. A central clock tower is a powerful and visually striking feature. Rising above the main structure, it is an unmistakable landmark. Equally interesting and adding a bit of balance to the overall presence of the courthouse, a rounded bay with classic stained glass windows extends 2.5 stories. The courtroom, located on the second floor, is octagonal in shape, creating a comfortable and visually engaging atmosphere. As in many courtrooms, a figure of justice holding the scales fills the area behind the judge's bench, to affirm that all will be treated fairly under the law. With the outbreak of the Civil War, some of the earliest military actions occurred in Western Virginia. On June 3, 1861, Union forces under General George B. McClellan advanced and engaged the Confederate troops at Philippi, county seat of Barber County, in the first land battle of the Civil War and a Union victory. The community and county also take great pride in their courthouse.
Courthouse is not just in Barber County, but every place in this state and other states as well. County courthouses are the focal point of the community, and this courthouse particularly, more so than most because of the courthouse setting. It is the focal point not just of this city, but of the county. there's two things that I think about in coming to Philippi. You come through the covered bridge, which is a unique experience in itself, and when you come through it, you're entering almost into another era. Then you drive through town, and there's this magnificent courtyard with this beautiful red Hummelstown stone structure that is our courthouse, and it's an appealing, drawing focal point. It just speaks of solidness, and it speaks volumes as far as the history of the county. Just a huge, solid structure. Then when you walk in, you would never expect to have something as magnificent as this courtroom in this building. When people walk in the courtroom, they are just awestruck. It's a place, it's almost reverence for people when they come in.
The Barber County courtroom has undergone a major restoration. In the 1960s, the courtroom was a much different place. A drop ceiling hid the skylight, and the woodwork had become darkened with neglect and age. Through an organized volunteer effort, which included inmate labor from the county jail, the courtroom was restored to its original beauty.
People in Barber County are very proud of this courthouse. Everything in the community evolves around it. We have a blue-gray reunion in the springtime in early June, and it's all around the courthouse and throughout the city. There's all kinds of things that happen throughout the year. Chili cook-offs, it's right around this courthouse square. All kinds of other things, antique car shows, and they're all set up right around the courthouse. So it's the focal point of the community. It's the people's courthouse. It's the place that they have their first contact with government, more so than state government or federal government. This is hands-on government for any person who lives in a county. It's the courthouse. It's critical to maintain them, to keep them renovated. They are just the focal point of every community, and it's important that we keep it that way.
Also in the Richardsonian Romanesque style is the Wood County Courthouse. Impressive and inspiring, a 100-foot tower serves as the main entrance to the building. The tower, with its arched entryways, is designed to appear as if it has sprung from the earth, and is both solid and permanent on the landscape. An intricate marble fountain featuring a bust of former circuit judge James Monroe Jackson stands near the building's west entrance. Completed in 1901, the courthouse is noted for the intricate patterns and detailed carvings that grace the facade. The late 19th century was a popular time for Romanesque architecture. Sitting prominently in the center of Fayetteville, the Fayette County Courthouse is a fine example. Completed in 1895, the 2.5-story brick and stone structure is rich in exterior design. The heavy stone columns of the porches and structural stonework add to the striking facade. Constructing a courthouse is a great expense, and in a cost-saving effort, this courthouse was constructed partly from brick and stone salvaged from the previous courthouse that was destroyed by fire. In 2004, the County Landmarks Commission erected a statue of the county's namesake, the Marquis de Lafayette, on the courthouse lawn. Lafayette played a key role in assisting the Continental Army during the American Revolutionary War. As the country moved into the 20th century, courthouse designs, while still large and impressive, changed in style. The Wirt County Courthouse, located in the town of Elizabeth, is a good example. Constructed in 1911, it was built in a neoclassical style with less emphasis on the overall mass of the structure. While the entire building is not ornate, a variety of details still draw attention. A small balcony above the main entrance, and decorative brickwork throughout the design add to the overall visual appeal. The resources needed to build a courthouse are many. In Wirt County, it was the oil boom that contributed to the construction of the courthouse in Elizabeth. Nearby Burning Springs, which now displays the relics of the oil industry, created great wealth for businessmen and brought people to the area. An oil derrick was visible in the town near the previous courthouse. In Princeton, the Mercer County Courthouse jumps into the modern era. It is built in the Art Deco style, which was popular in the United States from the 1920s to early 1940s. The four-story structure has a smooth facade of Indiana limestone and occupies a slightly elevated courthouse square in a very busy business district. The block-like main section of the building, with shorter flanking wings, is typical of the Art Deco design. Slender two-story windows and square columns add to the modern look popular at the time. Most notable are the relief sculptures on the center of the building. Friezes above the entrances depict the county from its pioneer times to the industrial age of the 1930s when it was built. The courthouse itself enjoyed a bit of history when it became a campaign stop for Robert Kennedy prior to the West Virginia Democratic primary in 1968. As Huntington emerged as an important urban and transportation center in the late 1880s, becoming the terminus of the C&O Railroad, the county moved the courthouse from Barboursville. At the time of its completion in 1901, the Cabell County Courthouse was indeed a grand sight, elegant in appearance, yet a truly functional public building.
Friends, our task as Americans is to strive for social and industrial justice achieved through the genuine rule of the people.
In October 1904, huge crowds gathered on the steps and grounds of the courthouse. One of America's great presidents came to speak. President Theodore Roosevelt was here to make a public address in his campaign to win a second term. The vice presidential candidate on the opposing Democratic ticket was West Virginia's Henry Gassaway Davis. The crowds again appeared in 1908 for William Jennings Bryan, who was making his third presidential bid, running against William Howard Taft. The community and county were growing rapidly, and by 1924, a new west wing was added, followed by an east wing in 1940. Both additions appear seamless in construction, matching the European-inspired Beaux-Arts design. The central section is capped by a dome and clock tower overlooking the park-like courthouse square and central walk to the main entrance. The interior is simple in appearance, but original elements remain that show the detail of the design. The two-story rotunda features a beautiful decorative iron railing. An elaborate glass dome caps the rotunda. The terrazzo floor, with patterns of mosaic tile, provides an additional element of color and interest when walking through the courthouse.
In any county, the most public space is probably the courthouse, because that's the repository for everything in that community. You're looking for a birth record, That's where it is. Death records, that's where it is. Public health records, that's where we go to court. That's where we pay fines. That's where the assessor is. All of those things. And because you have all of those activities there, it's a natural place if you want to commemorate things that have gone on that are of historical importance of your county. So if you've had something that was important in the American Revolution, don't be surprised if you see a statue there. Or Civil War statues, particularly because of West Virginia's creation during the Civil War and the fact that it's a more recent state than the states around it. You might find an overabundance of Civil War statues or plaques, or whether they're an equestrian or whatever, because that's central to what happened in the creation of the state of West Virginia. But you're also going to find other kinds of monuments. You might find them from World War I or World War II. If you want the county to remember things that were important in its past, if you want people to remember what the citizens from this county did in terms of their participation in the history of the United States, what better place to do that, to memorialize that, than on the grounds of the county courthouse? We do the same kind of thing at a capital of the United States. We just do it for the nation. And I think it helps us to remember that what the Capitol is to the United States of America, the courthouse is to a county.
Beyond governmental functions and aesthetic considerations of a courthouse, it also serves as a repository for our shared experience, our collective history in the form of many monuments that grace the courthouse grounds. It is a place to commemorate, respect, and honor.
God bless America, my home, sweet home.
Each Memorial Day, Marshall County sets aside the courthouse square for a service dedicated to those who served. Veterans, families, and members of the community gather to pay their respects and honor those who made the ultimate sacrifice. Inside the courthouse, all residents who have served in the armed forces since World War I are recognized on the memorial walls in the main entrance hallway. In an ever-changing world, the courthouse has adjusted. Recent modifications, largely to the grounds and front entrance, have been made to improve accessibility and prepare for a new annex that will provide additional office and record space for the county.
Well, over the years, courthouses do go through all sorts of changes, whether it's inside or outside. This courthouse went through a major change, and the change that took place many years ago still represents what you see today. Now, in the future, Marshall County is planning an annex, but I do know that the planners and the county commission are committed to keeping the aesthetics the way they are. They don't want to change that because it is such a beautiful building. They want to maintain that history. There's a part of it that I think the people would lose if a major portion of the courthouse were to change its appearance through whether it was termed improvements or whatever. But I think that would change also the person's perception of what can be found there at the courthouse, whether their perception would be the services would change or the way that we do business. But I think the fact that the historical nature of the courthouse dating back to when it was built has really never changed. So I think that it's all part of that architecture and that aesthetics, that when people see that courthouse, it's just a part of Marshall County.
At the turn of the 20th century, the courthouse had two stately towers that remained past mid-century. These eventually gave way to a single tower and a large portico, but did not diminish the presence of the building within the large courthouse square. Change is inevitable and sometimes occurs in a dramatic fashion. In August of 2008, Morgan County lost its courthouse in a devastating fire. The county rebounded, and the new courthouse was dedicated in the fall of 2010. The postmodern style retains elements of the old courthouse, such as arches and columns, but places them in new arrangements. While more modern in appearance, it still maintains the presence of a classic courthouse. It's a very impressive piece of architecture in the downtown area.
Well, the building is, the Morgan County Courthouse is really, it's all about the site and the historic aspects of the old courthouse, and really trying to portray really what is a relaxed community of Berkeley Springs. When we tore the old building down, we tried to save the cupola and reuse it. Sadly, it wasn't in any condition to be able to reuse, so we replicated the cupola and we used it as an entry element on top of the courthouse. Berkeley Springs is a community that, if you look around, there's a use of stone and stone walls. The state park across the street from the courthouse, there's a lot of stone that's used there. And so while the old courthouse didn't have the stone on it, we thought it very important to have a nice stone base to let the courthouse meet the ground, and it really sets that off and makes it really feel like it's part of Berkeley Springs. Really the first floor of that building is all about making the most out of the public space and allowing users of that building to be able to see outside and be connected with what's going on the street on both Fairfax Street and Washington Street.
One of the most important functions of the county government and the courthouse is to maintain and house important public records and documents. Every birth, death, marriage, land transaction, and more are recorded here. Placed into rather large record books, the life of the county and its residents is stored on the pages, not only for use in the present, but as an ongoing archive for future generations.
Here, for example, is our very first deed book in Barber County. This is the original deed book. It's still being used. And it dates from 1843, which was the founding of our county. You find in here the names of prominent folks who transferred and owned land at that time. Some of the other records are inventory books from estates. When individuals passed away, their property was inventoried and listed. But for example, here's an individual who was fairly well-to-do. His inventory lists various animals, cows and horses, hogs and sheep, and interestingly lists a windmill, one dining fork, which is makes you wonder what else the person used to eat with, as well as items of domestic use such as a frying pan and griddle, a fire shovel, coffee mill. These sorts of things would not be listed in appraisements or inventories today, but at the time, having these kinds of implements was really what marked one as having some wealth as opposed to not having that. One of the most interesting things that I ran across in using the records didn't have to do with real estate or personal belongings, but had to do with slavery. For a period of time before the Civil War, Barber County was part of Virginia, and it was, of course, lawful to own other humans as slaves and property in this county. And so one can still find in the books that are on our shelves references to those, to that chapter from our history. I was excited when I happened to run across a deed of emancipation and found that in the pre-war era, it was not uncommon for individuals to emancipate their slaves, and in order to do so, they would prepare and have drawn up a emancipation decree, or sometimes called manumission. And so one can see, for example, that the heirs of an individual who was deceased entered into an agreement to manumit the slaves of that deceased person. From motives of benevolence, they have manumitted and do set free from slavery, and do hereby manumit and set free from slavery our Negroes, to wit, Daniel, aged about 43 years, Roderick, aged about 40, and we do hereby grant and release unto the said Daniel and Roderick all of our right, title, and claim of and to their persons, labor, and services in 1854.
The record room is the heart of the county. It has all the records from the beginning of the county. It has births, deaths, marriages. We have all the deeds. Your mortgage would be there. Any document that is filed with the county is found in the record room in the county clerk's office. It's a public access. Anyone can come in and look up anything that they want to. We have very few private documents that are not public. And that would be if there was an adoption record, if someone was adopted and a birth certificate was changed or something like that. But basically, if someone wants to come and see how much your house costs, they can see your deed, or they can see how much you have a mortgage for, or anything else. It's all public access.
Fundamental to our democratic government is the process of open elections. Nowhere else is the electoral process so clearly visible than at the courthouse on election night. After the polls close, officials bring their equipment and the electronic ballots to the courthouse. The process involves making a tape copy of the contents of the PEB, or Personal Electronic Ballot. The PEB is actually where the ballot is contained, and not in the voting machine. The electronic files are brought to the county clerk's office for counting, and as a redundant system, a team compares the computer results to the initial data on the PEB. The results are then ready for candidates and the local media.
The only thing that I always remember is about the Marshall County Courthouse is when my first election back in 1992, and I'm sure you have a picture of our hallway which has all the names of all the servicemen that have served in the different conflicts in the United States, and they're all listed there. And my father is listed as a veteran of World War II and the Korean War, and my grandfather is listed as a veteran of World War I. And so I could just remember on election night, I kind of stayed away from the courthouse during the campaign. I didn't want to jinx myself and cause me to lose, but on election night, I was here waiting for the results, and my father was with me, and he pointed out his name. And then when I won, how proud he was that, you know, he's in the courthouse, and now I was going to have an office in the courthouse. And so that was a moment that really stood in my memory and always will.
Sometimes, like after you have this crazy hustle bustle day and it's just really crazy and stuff, and it's just real quiet, everybody gets home. Sometimes I just walk down the hallway and you just stand there and look up in the well, and it's just like, I'm really lucky to work here. I love working in this courthouse. It's gorgeous. It is gorgeous, and it takes a lot of work. And it's kind of like, once you've been here so long, especially in this courtroom, it's like anytime you see anything that needs done, you kind of take that personal interest to do that. I take great pride in this courthouse. I think it's one of the most beautiful in the state, and I love working here.
When I come into a town, I know exactly where the courthouse is going to be. And when I see it, I feel very comfortable that this is a town that's built and still acts the way it was supposed to act. That the courthouse is still the center of activity in the downtown, and that the courthouse is still the center of focus in the downtown. And so that makes me feel like the town itself is still alive, and I could still understand and function in that town.
With dedicated people in each courthouse performing tasks necessary to our society, helping to maintain our democratic way of life, the simple and profound words of Abraham Lincoln ring true. We are indeed a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And the courthouse is the vessel in which that trust and that promise endures. It is the essence of the American democratic experience. For information about this program, or to obtain a copy, contact the West Virginia Association of Counties, wvaco.org, or call 304-346-0591.